The case of
no beer. It's incognito.
You're doing an old school restaurant style.
Yeah. I gotta sport the GDG mug. So you know.
All the guys I used to work with in restaurants would drink coffee out of a beer cup, and then when I switched to the coffee cup, you knew it wasn't coffee.
my wife started speaking so much.
So hopefully you guys on the live stream can see the slides. It says GDG Missoula on there. Hi, everybody. Just waiting for it to come down to the right level. Jump in. So yeah, welcome. I'd like to think this is kind of like the first independently listed anyway, GDG Missoula group. You probably noticed that we started another independent meetup group. So try to follow along that one and let people know. The reason behind that is just because it's easier for a meetup to kind of promote that. It's based in Missoula. The Montana Programmers one kind of moves around cities, and so you kind of miss out on that promotion that meetup does for you to find local people. Anyway, so there's that. And let's see. So this is kind of your group, right? So feel free to introduce yourself to new people and take advantage of being here. And with that, I'm gonna get to the right place here. Go. Why are you not advancing? Okay, so far so good. All right. So thanks again to Workiva for sponsoring the space and food and beer tonight. So we're always looking for strong developers and especially front-end people, web developers, Pythonistas. So if you think you might be interested, grab one of the Workivians here and chat us up a little bit. You can raise your hands right down the middle. Middle of the tables. Okay. So anyway, we try to hold a meeting first Thursday of every month. We miss some here and there. We don't have a fantastic track record, but I'd say maybe 75%, something like that. So yeah, we're always looking for people to help out too. If you guys want to pitch in, volunteer, set stuff up, recruit people, give talks would be awesome. And it doesn't have to be a big formal thing. This is just how I tend to do it, just because I don't know, it's easy and I'm behind this podium and no one can hit me. But it can be just a round table and you can share something you've been working on or something you've played with and you're this is really cool, I just want to share it with the group. Or we can organize it around that and have a more less formal meetup and just kind of hack on stuff. That'd be cool too. So like I said, it's your group. That's me, Becker. So I know it's hard sometimes to approach new people. We got some new faces here. So One trick that I learned is to make yourself approachable. So that might be wearing, an interesting shirt or something, or a funny hat. You could choose something to share about yourself so they have a conversation to start with you. Like me, for instance, I once rescued a tiki from the ocean in Hawaii, and you can use that later for a conversation starter. So, yeah, if you want to talk to me, right? You can say, hey, tell me about that tiki thing. So before I talk about Polymer and web components, I want to tell you a little story about Jam. So a few years ago, cognitive scientists did this study where they took two groups of people, excuse me, to a market, and they gave them each coupons for $1 off of Jam. And at the market, the first group was shown, a stand with 6 jars of jam. They could taste the jam, they could inspect it, do whatever, shop around, whatever. Second group was given a display, but this time it was 24 jars of jam here. And the display was much larger and fancier, and they wrote into the marketing and everything. People seemed to like the display a lot. It was really great. They spent a lot of time tasting all the jams and everything. But when it came time to make a purchase, what happened with the group that looked at 6 jars of jam? 30% of them ended up using their coupon and buying a jar of jam. But the group that looked at 24 jars of jam, 3%. That's a 10x difference, right? So that's huge. There's this quote: when presented with an abundance of choice, you can feel increasingly unsure of whether yours is the right one, right? And so I want to bring this back to front-end choice paralysis, right? So this is our new framework every 6 months, right? You got to learn this new thing. First it's, one thing, and then the next thing, the next thing. And so you don't really know, is this the right thing that I'm going to choose for my project? Because 6 months later, you got to rewrite it. They're not all compatible. You can see the rise and fall of different things in here, right? Popularity over time. Who uses Knockout? I don't know. Anybody? Yeah. So it's scary, right? It's a weird world out there. You're like, what do I choose? It's hard. You don't always have the resources of a big company to choose. You might just be doing an independent project. It's a lot of guys who are independent contractors. So a few years ago, engineers, who work on browsers, got together to figure this out, and they're like, what can we do so you don't have to rewrite your code every 6 months? So they came up with this new set of standards called web components. And web components are different. They're not like web standards that have come before. Because normally, you're talking about HTML, and you're like, okay, they're going to build this new tag, and it's going to be like a video tag, and all the browsers have to implement it, and we got to wait to use it. And you're like, can I use .com? Oh, crap, can't use this for 3 more years, right? So web components, APIs, are very flexible and very powerful. These things are built into the browser to let you extend HTML yourself. So these are the 4 kind of pieces of web components. There's the template tag, which basically is like a chunk of the DOM that is held in memory in the browser, and you can stamp it out into the actual DOM that gets rendered. It's all browser side. It's all built in. It's not like in JavaScript land that has to be parsed and all that. There's shadow DOM, which is when you have your custom element. So you want to make an element for some fancy button or whatever. The internal DOM of it, the internal representation, is hidden away from the rest of the browser and the DOM, right? So this gives you a way to encapsulate your code. So you can write in Python, Java, all these other programming languages. You have a way to encapsulate your code. You import some stuff. You export whatever functionality. You have a strict API boundary, and stuff doesn't leak out, and stuff doesn't leak into your private variables. So this is scoping for the web. Custom elements, we talked about that a little bit. Define your own custom HTML tags. You don't have to wait for browser vendors to implement this and come up with ideas. And HTML imports is how you load in these web components. But I don't want to put words in people's mouths about where we are with web components, because everyone's like, hey, so we have to, you said you have to wait for browser vendors, but we still have to wait for browser vendors to put the web components in so that we can use them to do that. But I want to say this is the quote from Mozilla. Web components have been in planning for over 3 years. They're optimistic the end is near. All major vendors are on board, enthusiastic, and investing significant time to help resolve the remaining issue. So it's happening. Web components are here. There's something from Microsoft. They started working on template element. It's in Edge, actually already released. And they're continuing on. Everybody is on board. WebKit, there's a quote from WebKit. Lots of progress. This is from September, I think. I forget when, but yeah. Oh yeah, September. So all the browser vendors are making positive progress here. But these are primitives, right? So we can build libraries on top of them, right? They're designed to be like a primitive, low-level API. And so that's kind of where Polymer comes in. So when people ask, what is Polymer? It's a library that helps you build web components on top of these like primitive APIs, right? It's to make your life easier. I want to point out, it's not a framework, right? It's not trying to replace any existing JavaScript framework. It's not trying to replace Angular, React, like whatever. It's a library you can use, right? It's the very premise of web components. You can use this interoperably with other things. It doesn't matter. You can use it in your Angular app or your entire app. You know, that's the dream. So if you imagine like this is the world today, where you have your web component or your web platform and your existing frameworks, and then your app is built from these things. Like this is where we want to be. We want to be able to build reusable components that we can then assemble together into with an application framework even, you know, like you let that do the wiring up. You can have that orchestrate your application, and then you build applications on top of that. So over the past year, like the Polymer team has been doing a ton of work so people can feel confident putting Polymer into production. There's been exponential growth. Sorry, I got this lozenge. Just keep my mouth not dry. Anyway, so over 1.3 million public-facing pages are using Polymer, and the starter kit has been downloaded over 65,000 times. And we're seeing like, you know, big companies really just adopt this, right? Like ING Direct doesn't build applications, right? They just build components that they can just build up into applications, right? You don't have to like build an application and then throw it away because it's built on something you can't upgrade because it's a mess. So Polymer 1.0 internal adoption in Google has been spectacular as well. There's over 300 Google projects that are using it. And, you know, whoa. But, you know, you can see not all these are public, but there are a lot that are coming. So there's one, Google Play Music. Have you guys ever used this on the web? This is a Polymer app, the whole thing. YouTube Gaming, that's a Polymer app as well. There's a lot more coming. So Polymer is definitely ready for production. It's out there. It's actually at version 1.2.3, not even 1.0 at this point.
Can we interrupt your question?
Yes, anytime.
What does it mean if you say it's not a framework, but that these are Polymer apps? Like they just use Polymer, or they use Polymer at a low level and things and how?
I believe those apps probably just use Polymer. I don't know. I haven't looked into the source code of them. You know, you can use Polymer at any level, right? You can just say, I want to add this little bit of functionality to like one element of my page. A good example, it's not Polymer, but like a web component, is GitHub uses a web component for that little like time ago timestamp, and it automatically updates and it encapsulates all that logic in there to be like, oh, how many minutes ago was this? Oh, well, it's not, it's more than 60 minutes, so call it an hour, or, you know, whatever. So that's a web component that's out there in production. So it could be like this little tiny thing, or it could be a whole app, and all these things kind of working together. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I promise this is not really a long presentation, and we'll get to see some code here in a minute. It's not all fluff and promotion. So let's build an element. So we're going to build like something that's like not too crazy, right? We're going to build this little alert banner, like a toast. And anytime you create a new element, you'll want to create an HTML file that it's going to hold its definition, and that's your HTML import. It's all contained in one HTML file, and that's, you know, one of the new web component standards, right? So we'll use it to load our application, and I'm going to kind of walk through the parts of what you're seeing here. So you've got your imports at the top, so you can import all your dependencies. We just got Polymer listed, but you could put like other script tags or, you know, CSS files that this component needs, and then it'll load those if you import this element. Then you've got your container for your web component, and then you've got your local DOM, which is the thing that this element will render, you know, inside of itself. Okay, and then so now I'm going to drop some markup in here. So I did some styles and some, you know, div here in my little script. So, so when someone uses an instance of my alert tag banner, alert banner tag, said that backwards, they should see that markup render on the screen, right? And then note you can include style tags, and those things will be scoped inside of this element, and they won't leak out and affect anything else here. So you could even do like # like IDs here, or any class. This this alert class, if you have an alert class on some other part of the page outside of this element, it's not going to get the blue background and the white color. It's self-contained, right? Which is pretty cool. What? Okay. Yeah.
So how does that fit in the rest of the DOM? If it's a DOM module ID alert banner here, is that, if you're looking at the DOM, does that just add that to the DOM, or is it?
No, this is like your definition. We'll get to how you use it. It looks just like an HTML tag. So this is the name. Whoa, this is the name of your tag you're defining, alert banner. And then, so in one more slide, you'll see how it works. So you just kind of kick it off, and then Polymer, like I said, is just kind of like grease the axle. It's instead of like saying, okay, document.register element and like creating this custom element yourself, it just says, okay, Polymer, create this tag, alert banner. It goes find the DOM module with that same ID and does all the script for you, right? So it gives you a really short declarative way to just create a tag and a custom element. So then you use your tag in your HTML, alert banner, and it's going to render out that content. So note, this is not like a JSX, like I fooled you kind of situation where like it looks like HTML, but it's really in JavaScript, and then you like inject it. Like this is in your main HTML file, and it just like is now a new HTML element. So
you like inspected it to its just appearance.
yep, yeah, we'll see that in a minute. So yeah, so there's your toast. It looks like that. Something awesome happened. So this element kind of stinks, right? Because it's hard coded. It always says the same thing. Hey user, something awesome happened. Like maybe you want to use that once or twice. Like let's make it better. Let's make it reusable. So we can select content that we want to pull into our custom element. So when we use our tag, it's kind of like passing a parameter in JavaScript, right? So this is our alert banner module definition, and we have instead of hard-coded content, we've got content select.message, right? And that means this is like a CSS selector, and it says anything that matches that class, we're going to select that and inject it there into our custom element. So back out, that's the light DOM. I'm going to just skip over that. So yeah, I just talked about that. So back out in here in our tag, when we add in a new span with a class of message, and we want to customize our message to alert whatever we want, now it's going to select that and then inject it back into my custom component. So you can pass things in. So that matches the class, and boom, success, your first component. So I don't want to, I can't emphasize this highly enough. This is extremely powerful, right? You can have as many content tags in there as you want. You can put different classes and inject them into different places in your custom element, and you can customize it any way you want.
You just do content without a selector. Will it grab whatever's between the XML?
I think it'll do the whole inner HTML basically. Yeah. So the last thing we're going to do to make this kind of more configurable, we're going to do something that HTML does kind of out of the box that you might take for granted, right? So the best aspect of HTML is that you can take an element like some checkbox here, and you can add a single attribute to it and change its state, right? You can say checkbox checked, cool, and the UI updates, and you have that property on your element, and you can check to see if the input is checked, and it's great. So I want to add the same kind of behavior to my element, and to do that, I will add this properties object. So we're going to add a shown property, so whether or not this alert banner is shown, and it's a type of Boolean, and the initial value is false. And yeah, so we can bind this attribute up here. This is in our DOM module still, in our module definition. And the content that we're going to stamp out inside of our module is going to have this new thing. And this really fooled me. Hidden is actually a property on every single element in the DOM. It's not an attribute, it's a property. So Polymer binds to properties, not attributes, right? Because attributes are like serialized forms of them. And so you can bind right to that property, and you say, okay, well, they're not, when this shown property changes, we're going to change the hidden property on that element, and it's going to hide and toggle this thing. So you don't have to say like, change the CSS class of like display none. You just set the property hidden to false or true. I never knew that. I've been developing web for the web for like many years. I never knew that. That's surprising. Anyway, so cool. What this means is you can, if someone can use your alert banner, and by default, this thing isn't shown, so we don't see anything. And then we add our shown attribute, and it shows up. Just like the checked attribute in the checkbox. So now your element, works just like a regular HTML element. They're indistinguishable for what's already built into the browser. So those are elements, right? And up to this point, we've mainly been talking about those. But the beauty of our components, web components, is that you can reuse these elements, right? And when you want to add a new feature, instead of having to write it yourself, you can just say there's an element for that. And we're going to look at some elements that are already written. So Google has already created like these product lines of elements out there into like things that you can reuse to build your apps. There's the core like reusable elements. There's a paper UI, like material design. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but like it's like a bootstrap like library. It styles your app really nice. And then there's all the Google Web Components. So there are over 250 like Google APIs. I don't know, Maps, Drive, Calendar, whatever. And now you can use these things as an element. All you have to do is like import and drop a tag into your page, and you have a Google map. Or you can pull data out of a chart or like a spreadsheet or whatever. So that's kind of cool. So if you think about that for a second, if you have a complicated API and you need to bootstrap some JavaScript just to like get it on your page, wrap it in a custom element and set some properties on it, and you can pull that in with no problem, right? That's pretty cool. So yeah.
Is there like a shareable component? Can you make elements and share them?
Yes. So at the end of the slide, I'll just jump ahead. But there's a couple websites now that have libraries of custom elements. There's customelements.io. You can go there and search for a bunch of custom elements, and there's tons of stuff that's already out there.
And you can just do the HTML import straight from the CDN.
If they are hosted on a CDN, yeah. A lot of them are just like on the thing, and you just like Bower install them into your app or something. I think the Google ones might be on a CDN now. I think they're working on that. But yeah. So there's a couple other ones like Platinum Elements, and I'll just kind of like touch on this briefly. But these are pretty amazing. Like the features that are on mobile these days, like push notifications, offline capabilities, background syncing without your app open. This is all like in the web now in modern browsers. And these Platinum Elements wrap that functionality and give it to you for a really like cheap way, right? You can just drop an element in and be like, yeah, I want a service worker cache my whole app. Here's the resources I want to cache. Boom, it's cached. So they're, that's pretty amazing, right? Push notifications, same thing. So here's what service worker caching looks like. You import, a Platinum service worker tag, and you set up your cache, and you can set up your default cache strategy to say, okay, well, go request it on the network first, and then if it doesn't come back, then cool, hit the cache. So when I'm offline, it just works. And you can tell it to pre-cache all those resources. So the first time you load your app and the service worker starts up, it's going to get all those things and have them all cached. The next time you load your page, it's going to work. There's a line called the gold elements, which are kind of like not as exciting, but I'm going to talk about them. They're targeted at e-commerce, so you've got things like auto-validating credit card fields and like email fields, phone number fields, and more that are like mobile optimized for auto-completing and stuff, because you're on the mobile, you don't want to type in all your stuff, right? Like it can help with your checkout flow, like 30% faster or whatever. So you've got like these kind of elements in there. So that's the Google catalog. They're adding more, like there's elements for that. There's Google elements, there's custom elements that people write. You can write your own and push it up to the store, right? Or, the catalog. But so this is where it gets a little confusing, right? Because everyone's like, okay, well, I can write an element, but how do I write an application? And I kind of got my secret out of the bag earlier, but you don't really need to write a whole application with Polymer. You can, right? Like you can introduce it easily with as many elements as you want, or you can just add like one specific little thing that you need, one feature. But if you want to build an app, like a great place to start is this Polymer Starter Kit, which I mentioned in the very beginning. And, it's got responsive design, like kind of out of the box. It's got this boilerplate like app, right? It's got a header and it's got, some stuff in here. This is a horrible animated GIF here. It's also got like all the tooling you need built in, right? So it's got like browser sync hooked up, so you can like load up your app, you edit your file and you save it, and it's already watching the file system and it just reloads automatically. And then we'll see that in my demo at the end. So let's see, we got build process out of the way. We've got like testing, JS hint, which like looks at all your code, make sure like it's the right format and everything. JS hint kind of thing. Vulcanize is kind of like a minify, compress it down for production sort of tooling. All this tooling is built in. It's pretty great. So here's a little demo of the starter kit offline. So this is the right out of the box. You just turn on your service worker cache. Hold on, wait for it. I think it's going to loop around. Pull down, go offline. Yeah, all right. Cool. And then reload and it's still there, right? Cool. So you can download that, developersschedule.com, Polymer starter kit. All the slides and links and stuff will be at the meetup group later on. So Polymer is lean, mean, production ready. Gives you the power to create elements or leverage elements that other people have created and added to the ecosystem. And with the starter kit, you can get up and running with all the best practices and a beautiful application scaffold that's already set up to work offline. If you want to learn more, there's a video series by Rob Dodson on YouTube, bit.ly Polycasts, and he goes really deep on each topic, from testing to like how do you do data binding, how do you do like all the little bits, how do you do testing? Oh, I already said testing. Continuous integration, like everything. It's pretty great.
I'm assuming there's some minimum level of browser version.
Yeah. I believe it's IE 10 plus, and then all the modern browsers, so like Chrome, Firefox, Safari, they all kind of work. I actually got it to work on IE 9 too. I don't know. They'd only test like 10 plus, but there you go.
All right. It's all right.
On the 12th, yeah. Death to oldie idea.
Cheers.
Yeah. Maybe we should have a party just like, yeah. So we all get together and just like shoot IE statues or something.
Burn a fire.
So I found these, and so I want to leave you with some resources, and then we'll do some demos. There's 10 free courses up on Egghead.io. If you haven't heard of Egghead, it's pretty cool. And there's like a video like course. There's 10 of them walking through Polymer and creating your own like elements. And again, I'll post all the links. There's some code labs that came out of Google I/O from last year, or last year. Now it's 2016. And then the Polymer Starter Kit has great examples of like using all these things. There's a ton of demos that I also wanted to link up here. I'm going to come back to these and show you a couple things. But thank you. That is the initial part of the presentation. Where's my cursor? I'm just going to unmirror my display so these guys can see what I'm doing. Where am I? Okay, where are the slides? They're gone. Okay, fine. Gonna work. Oops, dang it. We're doing it live. You guys can look at all my passwords. Back to the demos. Cool. Hopefully the people on the live stream are able to see this. So one thing I left out about writing your own app, if you do want to write kind of a more appy kind of thing, there's a web component router, like app router, which is pretty sweet. So you just have an app router tag, you just import. Is this really tiny or what? Yeah. Make that bigger. So again, this is how you use a web component. You just import it into your page, and then you have a new tag available. So you can just say app router, and then you set up your routes. So when you hit the /home path, you're going to go to this page, and this is a deferred load HTML, so it doesn't actually load all these pages until you click the link, which is pretty cool. So that's a pretty cool like routing solution for web components if you want to do that route. What's another one that was pretty cool? These guys, go ahead. Santa Tracker is written in Polymer. I didn't mention that earlier. There's a company called Vaden. I don't know how to pronounce it. whatever. They made this, like everybody loves data grids, right? So like they made this awesome data grid. So you can do like, I don't know, like sorting, right? Let's choose that one. So you can do like sorting of your data grid. And this is how you use it. You just have a grid. Set up the columns, set up the values, and you just set the data. So you just have this element, and you say dot items, data. So that's pretty cool. And you could load that down from like, you know, an XHR or something, load that data and set it on the element. So they're doing cool stuff. Check that out. And I'll leave a lot of these just you guys can explore a little bit. These demos offline. I don't know if you've seen the Santa tracker, it's pretty cool. Oh, this is the GitHub repo. Oh. Anyway, it looks like this. Have you guys played it? I played it this year for the first time. It's really cool. They've got games and like videos and stuff. Cool. So now let's see. Now I want to do like, let's see if I got my thing up. It helps if I type the word serve correctly. Sorry, work's bleeding into my private life. Cool. So I made this little collection of Polymer demos, and this is the Polymer starter kit I started with. And so if I make this smaller, you'll see that it's like got the sidebar on the left, and if I make it smaller, like on a phone or a tablet or something, sidebar goes away, and I can click the little thing and bring it out. That's cool. And I've got routing, so I can switch pages without like a refresh. So that's cool. But let's open the DevTools, and this is something that Chris was kind of alluding to. So if I open up, come on, bigger. We've got a couple of different elements on this page. So we've got an online detector. I'm not going to turn off my Wi-Fi because then the stream will go dead, right? But I'm selecting this element, and if you do like $0 in the Chrome DevTools, that's the current element you have selected. So there's my element, and I can say like online equals false, and hey, look, there's my alert banner, and it says alert false, right? So it's substitute this thing into the page, which is pretty cool. And then I can also like, where am I here? Okay, alert banner, yeah. And then we can kind of dive in and see this, the internal DOM of this element right now. Again, because this is polyfilled, it's using something that shows that. If you were to use the actual shadow DOM, which is still not implemented like everywhere, it is in Chrome, but Polymer itself still uses the polyfill, believe it or not. Anyway, so yeah, so like we can change our alert banner to say like, oh, if we have unsafe changes, then we're going to set that to true. Go back and come back online. Online equals true. Cool. So when we have unsafe changes, then we try to reload the page, and we've got like a prevent leaving the page custom element that will say, hey, you sure, bro? No, I don't want to reload actually. So our prevent unload element is right there, right? And you can change the message. You can say, is this thing enabled or not? You can say enable it true. You can change the message to like, I don't know, don't leave me. And then what? Then we're gonna reload the page. Don't leave me. So I mean, these just look like regular old HTML elements. It's pretty cool, right? Let's take a look at the code real quick.
So with the polyfill, though, you still get those, like your CSS classes are still bleeding out, right? Because it's not actually shadow DOM.
They do a little fancy thing where they set the class of the element on all the things inside, and they do it in such a way that it's like it's actually contained.
Okay.
So it rewrites your styles for you a little bit. Yeah. So it acts the same way that it would without the polyfill there. So here's wow, this is really small again. I think I would have prepared for this better. Okay, so bigger is better. So here's an example of two custom elements working together, right? And they're kind of bound together with this online property. So we've got an online detector, that listens to when the browser thinks it's online or offline. And we can look at that source code real quick. But it's interesting because like, where is this online property coming from, right? It's actually, you can think of it like it's exported from this element. It's kind of like a data provider, right? So it's actually creating this online property and like setting it out. And then this guy, the alert banner, is listening to it. So when this toggles from true to false or false to true, then the alert banner will say, oh, if it's true, then send my alert banner, I'm offline. So online detector is a good example of an entirely self-contained custom element, right? We import Polymer, we define our DOM module, online detector, and then we initialize our element with Polymer. And this does all the dirty work of the JavaScript code for us. And we just say, okay, this element is called this. We have a property called online. It's Boolean and reflect the attribute too, right? True, sorry. This means there's an optimization in there. Like if you don't want it to reflect a property to an attribute because it's expensive, say you have a big ball of data, you don't want to like serialize it to JSON and like put it on the attribute. You just want to keep it internally as property. So that determines whether or not you want to reflect it to the attribute. And then notify is what kind of hooks up all that data binding. So it'll fire an event saying, hey, this attribute changed. And then other elements can say, oh, the element changed or the attribute changed. Cool. Like I'm going to take that new value and put it in myself. And then the initial value of my detector is whether or not the browser is online. You can provide an API, functions on your element, custom functions, set online, set offline, and it just changes the internal state. And then you wire up like when this element is actually added to your app, so it's added to the DOM, then it registers listeners on the window. It says, when you become offline, set offline, and become online, set online. And then when I remove that element from the DOM, it cleans up after itself and removes the listeners. So this whole thing is all just like self-contained. You don't have to worry about it. And all you have to do is just say, I want an online detector and fire some true or false when I change state.
So how is that, like the export of the online value?
Yeah.
The online detector, which is then routed into the alert banner?
Yeah.
Where is that scope to? Like, what's the scope for that?
It's inside of this.
Of that template tag?
Yep. So
is there something special about the template tag?
Yeah, it's basically like your scope, right?
Okay.
So like inside your custom element, you have a template, and that's your local DOM. Okay. That's your scope. You're like inside of that custom element, and that's where it is. So it's kind of weird because everyone's like, don't use DOM, it's slow, but everything you do in the browser uses DOM. So this just embraces it and says, okay, well, DOM is already a good model for a tree of elements and attributes and properties and functions, and let's just embrace that and use it.
So could you throw that online outside of that scope, that template scope? Or is the template like a special scope that's only like once in this file or something?
You can put these anywhere. This one is a little tricky, so I can talk about this. This is how you can like subclass elements. So you can subclass a button or something, make it a fancy button. What they did for Polymer, they have this little convenience one that says, I'm going to subclass the template element, which is a now built into browser element. I'm going to customize it saying it's a DOM bind template, which means I'm not only just going to define my template, I'm going to stamp it right into the DOM right where you defined it automatically for you, instead of like defining it and then having to like fire up some JavaScript and then find the location and say add to document. So it's just a little convenience saying put the template here.
You can only have one template per HTML
No, you
page,
can.
or you can do multiple.
Yeah, you can do as many as you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be the scope. If you had another template with another online, they wouldn't interact with this online.
Inside of here, probably not. Like here, or like if you put another one over here, like something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Nope. So yeah, that's kind of the rundown of how you can have elements kind of talking to each other. And so to be clear, this data binding thing is Polymer specific. It's a way that they decided to like hook things up. The boilerplate web component stuff doesn't have any of this data binding stuff. You can just use that without data binding, just like to encapsulate your code and your, styles and stuff inside of an element. So, questions? What other things you want to see?
And these some elements still fire off events like normal browser events.
Yeah, so these are all just normal browser events. So internally, when this says notify true, what this means is when I change this online property, it's going to fire an event, and Polymer just uses like a convention saying like fire online dash changed. So from that element, it just probably gets out.
So would you bind a function to an attribute then on your element? Like receive note, like handle that event?
Yeah, you can wire it up manually. There is an example in here, and I'll make this elements custom, like elements kind of examples available. But yeah, there's an example where you can just do it the manual way. It's a little bit more work, obviously. So that's why Polymer made it a little easier.
He's saying you can do the alert inside of the JavaScript for the alert template. You could do, you know, add event listener for online changed on the online detector element, rather than doing the online binding between the two.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, with the rules of like DOM event propagation, right? It has to contain it, so it's going to propagate this way. Yeah.
So I work in an environment where a lot of micro businesses that have really bad WordPress sites that I have to pretend like I'm using. And one of the big problems, especially in the themes with the responsiveness, is a ton of display none, display none, display none. The problem with display none is it's still sent the device, it just doesn't show it, which is really not a good practice. I'm wondering if you could sneak some Polymer into some of these themes for the responsiveness so that it just doesn't send it. I mean, have you seen that? Can I avoid display none by using that?
Yeah, you could. So you'd want to like include the polyfill, so you have all the web component stuff. You could like lazy load. You basically want to. Is that what you want to do?
Yeah,
So
I just wanted to if it's going to a smartphone on a certain size, not send the stuff that's not being displayed. That's ridiculous.
Right. Yeah. You could do that. Yeah, in a separate like round trip. So you send down the first page, the first bit of the page. You have a bit of script that says, okay, well, what device am I on? You know, user agent sniffing is evil, whatever. But like determine what you're on, and then say, okay, well, I'm going to load the mobile custom element, or I'm going to load the desktop custom element. And you just you just create a link tag that has an HTML import and say, okay, use that. And then the element, wherever you use it, will be upgraded to use that implementation. So if you have two custom elements called the same thing, but one's the mobile one and one's the desktop one, and you just load the one you want, it'll just upgrade that element, and all of a sudden you are using it. Or just don't load it at all and it won't render anything.
Yeah, that's the whole point. Why load a slideshow into that device if it's not going to show? And that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Themes, it's crazy.
Right. Yeah, so there's a good example of like deferred loading here. So there's lazy loading, and so here's a lazy loaded tag, and there's nothing to see here. And then when I click this button, it's going to call lazy load, and it's going to go load this element that I've written in here as HTML file. So when I click it, boom, I'm lazy loaded. This lazy loaded element, the browser doesn't know about until you've imported the definition. So when you click that button, it goes and gets the definition, pulls it down, registers it with the browser, and the browser goes, oh, I know what this element does now. Cool, and I'll stamp in your custom element.
And how does that affect the load time?
The initial load time will be smaller, right? Because you're not sending it down first. But then you have a little bit of JavaScript to execute after the page is loaded, and then you have to load the HTML file. So it could end up technically being longer, but for the user, it's going to come up faster initially.
So how is that on click mapped to, or how's the content that's downloaded?
Oh, sure.
Mapped into that element?
Yeah. I just call this function, which does this, what I just said. So you create a link element, you call it import, and the href is the thing you pass in, and then append it to the body, right? So it's a lot like.
Yeah, that'll bring, but how does it get injected into that, that lazy dash load element? Yeah, that was empty.
Yep. So that's a good question. So when I append this link tag, the browser says, oh, cool, there's a new tag appended. I'm going to go load that HTML. And in the HTML file, it's going to define a new module. Over here, lazy load, this element doesn't mean anything to the browser, right? It's just like, oh, I don't know, that's some tag I don't know about. So it's not gonna do anything with this. It's just gonna say, okay, well, the tag is typo or whatever. I'm just gonna render nothing to see here. And then once the definition comes down, the browser, runs that and says, oh, cool, there's a new tag. It's called lazy loaded. Now I know how to interpret this tag, and it upgrades it in place.
Oh, okay, so lazy loaded is a tag defined in that payload here.
Yep. Lazy. Yeah. Wherever it is. Lazy. So here's your lazy custom element. Lazy loaded.
Okay.
Too many lazies. Speaking of lazy, let's go with it. Lazy loaded image. I don't know if you guys caught that because it happened really fast, right? I like games though. My kids play all the time. Oh crap. So let's turn our network down to like a regular person's internet, like 4G or something. And then when we scroll down, this doesn't load the image. This is a good question, like similar to what you had. It doesn't load the image until the thing is actually on the page. I'll clear my network. And then as soon as it comes on the page, you'll see the image loads. Right? A lot of websites do this, but now you can just do this, right? You can just say, oh, I have a lazy image tag. This image is a lazy image. Here's my initial source. So this is the source that's going to show immediately. And then I give a URL of the like real image to load afterwards. And then you can give it a width and height of the final image, or leave it off and it'll just display it the full size. So that automatically just loads up when that thing becomes visible. So it's all kind of like really cool things you can encapsulate. You don't have to like hack into a bunch of different projects, right? Like I could easily take this tag and move it into my next project and reuse it, which is pretty cool.
That looks really hard to test.
It's not. So I don't have too many tests in here apparently, but my greeting test. Cool. So it comes with web component tester, which is imported here. So you say, okay, here's your polyfills if you need them. If you're running in like Phantom or whatever, you're gonna need that. Load the web component tester. Load this like fixture helper. Whoops, hold on. I've gone off the page. So these two things kind of like do some fixture helping for us. And so that's what this is. It's a test fixture. And that's kind of like if you've ever written test before each or whatever, where it like sets up the state for each test. So like before each test, I'm going to create a new element so that it, like my previous test doesn't mess with it. And then all of a sudden I'm left with weird state. So every time it's going to create a new one of my tags, my greeting tag here. And then, so in my setup, I get my fixture that's created for me. And this is the actual HTML element. And then I'm going to test that it says welcome. So inside of my greeting, I'm going to say, cool, get the header. And then the header text should say welcome. So that's kind of, it's lame, right? But like, it's pretty easy, I think. Maybe that's not a good example.
It says query selector, does that mean CSS selector?
Query selector is basically a way to search the DOM elements below the current element for something that matches a CSS selector. So I'll get back an HTML element starting at my greeting tag, and I can maybe open this up so you can see what I'm talking about.
Because it's normal.
Oh, I'm in this file. Where is this? I have no idea where this thing is defined, actually. Let's see. Elements my greeting. Okay, that should be right in here somewhere. Are you guys seeing it? LP, where is it? Apparently it does not exist. I must have deleted it. Awesome. Anyway.
It did exist.
Do I have any other good test examples in here? Darn it. I moved some things over into this example repo and I didn't copy everything. Darn it. So inside of the custom element, there's probably like an H2 tag that has the actual greeting. So from the like top level, we probably have like my greeting. Why did I do that? Imagine this is the tag. Right? It's not obviously in the right place, but so you're basically testing that like, oh, the default state is going to say welcome for this element, right? Because I haven't changed the header to anything or like the value of it. Imagine if there was like an element like our online tester, right? Like if we had some state of like, you know, am I online or am I offline? I might create a fixture and then say, check the default state. The default state should say, I'm online or whatever the default was. And then I set online equals false and then verify that the value is false. So you could have a different test for each one of those different states. You could also, you know, call some functions that you've defined in there, like in your property definition. Like you might want to test set online, set offline, that it actually changes the property that it's supposed to, that kind of thing. Cool. It actually makes testing kind of nice, right? Because you just create your element. You don't have to worry about any other state or any kind of integration. Obviously, you can like go up one level, and if you have two custom elements inside of yourself, you can then create the top level component, check this guy, check that guy, make sure that like when you change one thing here, this element's property updates, and you can test like, you know, that subtree of whatever your element. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you just say those methods that you define in that prototype or whatever it is, you know, that you're injecting that Polymer function?
Yeah.
Those get basically exposed on the custom element itself, so you get a handbook for the custom element.
Yep, that is the prototype basically, yep.
Okay.
So on my online detector, I have, what was it called? Set online, right? So its functions are there on the element. And when I do it, it does the right thing, and I typoed it. Yay. Sweet. Any other questions on how to do stuff or anything like that? Want to see some more demos?
Virtual list. Did I see that somewhere?
You did, yeah. Yeah, so virtual list is basically just a bunch of divs that are colored, and it has a little number on them. I imagine you have like 10 million of these things. You obviously don't want 10 million DOM nodes because your browser will probably crash. So Iron List is one of those Iron components that Google has provided for us, and it does virtualization of these elements, right? So you just kind of give it how much outside of the viewport you want to maintain, and as you scroll, when it gets like off the thing, it'll just recycle elements and then stamp in the correct template in the right place. So we can take a look at how that looks real quick. So I create a template, right? So this is a template inside of the other template we talked about before. And then I've got my list provider, which just goes and gets some JSON data of like however many things. You know, imagine I could get that from wherever, right? I could just like return an object, I could go over the network, whatever. And then I pass that list as items to the Iron list. I set which variable is going to be my named variable inside this loop, basically. And then for each one of the items, there's a template that says how is this thing going to like render itself. And then I'm going to render a div for each item, and the div just has a color and the number that it represents. So that's it. Like that's all you have to do. And I can make this list a million things long, and it only renders, you know, the default amount of items on the screen. So let's see how many there are. I don't know. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About 10 or so. And we can do something cool. Let's take a look at this and kind of see it in action. So what this is awful. What we're kind of looking at is all the layers that are on the page. So we've got like the Oh, dang it. So there we go. So it tells you where all the layers are on the page. So this is the sidebar, and this is the header, and these are all the different elements. And as I scroll, you can see they like go up and disappear, right? It only has things that fit on the viewport.
Is this Canary tree?
It is Canary, but it's in stable too, this tool. If you want to go to the layers thing, you can go to experiments and turn on layers.
Oh.
Pro tip, ready? If you hit shift 6 times in this panel, you get a whole bunch of more experiments, but they're not stable. So don't use them. You can do all types of stuff in here, but every time you turn them on, it just crashes everything. Some of them work, some of them don't. Some updates and you're out of luck. There should be a text box like crash Chrome. Cool. So yeah, so that's the virtual list. It's really janky because the layer panel is on, but if we turn that off, it's not too bad. So we can scroll through like, I don't know. I don't even know how many I put in there. Lots.
Does it have a scroll bar anywhere on there? Because I was wondering if you could add like 30 million of them and then scroll to the bottom and see if it gracefully handles like translation limits and stuff. Like 32 million is like an upper boundary.
Right. You can
Sorry,
do
this
like,
is more of a personal interest.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
You guys ever heard that podcast with the guy that invented JSON?
Jason?
so you can,
I thought his name was Jason.
No. But he was like, he'd never imagined people would actually send a gigabyte JSON envelope. Yeah. He's like, that was a edge case.
yeah. What have I done?
Let's go fix that, I guess.
Yeah. So you can just go and get the element, which I have selected here.
Um,
And then there's a scroll to index function, and you can just like, scroll and it just goes.
okay, so what's the scroll top right now of the 0 element? Oh, then here's the scroll top.
That.
Not high enough. All right, this is an exercise for the reader.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a iron list built into Polymer. It's pretty cool. Well, not built into Polymer, but already built as an element. So, and I mentioned custom elements. I'll bring that up real quick. So there's like all types of stuff in here. This is not the best way. There's no really good way to browse it, but you can search for it. It's kind of annoying. Could use a little help, but a lot of these things are also on Bower or NPM registry, so you can search from that way. You guys are familiar with that? But there's all types of stuff in here you can do. Like, I don't know, what's the ACE editor, right? So you could like drop a code editor into anything and just say like, cool, I want a code editor. You're like, sweet, I got a code editor on the web. But yeah, that's it. Like you just have these elements that other people have written for you and you just use them. It's amazing. I think that's a great place to end, actually. Yeah. Cool.
Nice talk.
Are you taking questions? Sorry, I totally ignored you guys.
Oh, no.
There's a lot of questions. Oh, okay. How's it going? So far, so good.
Can you compare and contrast?
Oh my God, Mark is asking a lot of questions. That's a good question.
Great question.
There's some sort of transformation into standard HTML. What do you mean by that exactly? Yeah, kind of. We're actually extending the HTML language by providing these elements. If that's an answer, I don't know.
Are you still there?
I am still here. Hopefully, these guys can hear me, and I'm not just talking to myself. Hey, look, Clapping. Yay. Cool. All right. Well, let's. I'm gonna hang up on you guys. Later online.